The assassin's blade struck my empty throne while Lucian's blood-dark glove closed around my wrist. "Down," he ordered. I had never obeyed another alpha in my life, but the marble beneath us erupted before I could punish him for trying. White shards hissed through torchlight. Hot iron and bitter smoke flooded the throne room as 6 council guards lowered their ceremonial spears and turned them toward me. So that was the coup. I tore free of Lucian, seized the nearest spear, and drove its blunt shaft into the first traitor's chest. He crashed against the bronze doors. The others rushed me together, boots hammering the floor, believing numbers could make them stronger. They were wrong. I broke their formation before Lucian drew his sword. Steel rang against marble. A spearhead grazed my black uniform, but I trapped the weapon beneath my arm and sent its owner sprawling. 2 loyal sentries stormed through the eastern archway. Within seconds, every conspirator was disarmed and kneeling beneath the crimson banners they had intended to tear down. I stood over them without a wound, my breathing steady, their fear sharp in the smoky air. "Open the doors," I commanded. The bronze panels groaned apart, revealing counselors and soldiers packed into the corridor. Their whispers died when they saw me standing and the rebels kneeling. I raised the broken spear. "Your strongest alpha still holds the throne." Fists struck breastplates in thunderous salute. My title survived. By midnight, the conspirators had been removed and the citadel had fallen silent, but one detail refused to fit. The first explosion had destroyed the throne, not the command platform where my battle order required me to stand. In the strategy chamber, cold blue lamps shone across a table covered with maps and wax-sealed directives. I placed my original order beside the copy delivered to my officers. One line differed. My position had been moved 12 feet west, directly beside Lucian's assigned post. Only my bodyguard possessed both the clearance and the cipher needed to alter it. He entered without armor, carrying his sword in its black leather scabbard. Smoke still clung to his uniform. "You changed my deployment order." Lucian shut the door. "Yes." No excuse. No lowered eyes. His composure scraped harder than defiance. "You manipulated your sovereign during an active security operation. I moved you away from a compromised position." Before the attack began, his jaw tightened. I recognized the pattern. "Then you should have reported it." There was no time. I crossed the room until the silver clasp at his collar reflected in my eyes. Lucian was the only alpha who never stepped back when I approached. That had once made him useful. Now it made him dangerous. "Your duty is to execute my commands. My duty is to keep you alive, not by taking control from me." Silence settled between us, broken only by wax dripping onto the metal tray. His altered order had saved my life, yet it had also exposed the one thing I guarded more fiercely than my body, my authority over myself. I removed the obsidian insignia from his collar. Its pin clicked against the table. "Lucian Vale, you are dismissed from the Royal Guard, effective immediately. Surrender your weapons and leave the citadel before sunrise." For the first time that night, his composure cracked. His fingers closed around the edge of the table, whitening at the knuckles, but he did not plead. He unbuckled his sword and laid it beside the insignia. The weight of it made the maps tremble. "If that is your command." "It is." Lucian walked to the door, then stopped with his hand on the iron latch. The blue light sharpened his profile while the room cooled around the space he was about to leave. "Then ask yourself one question before sunrise," he said. "How did I know where the first strike would land?" He stepped out, leaving his sword behind, and carrying the answer with him. The iron latch had barely settled when 3 measured knocks crossed the chamber. Cold air slipped beneath the door, carrying rain, lamp smoke, and the faint metallic scent of the lower armory. I opened it to find Lucian standing exactly where I had dismissed him, stripped of sword and insignia, a sealed leather folio tucked beneath one arm. "You were ordered to leave before sunrise. Then arrest me," he said, stepping past me without permission. The refusal should have earned him chains. Instead, he placed the folio beside his surrendered sword and cut its seal with the sharp edge of the obsidian insignia. Inside lay copies of my private movements for the next 7 days, council sessions, training hours, even the route I used between my chambers and the eastern baths. Each page bore a different clerk's mark, but the corrections had been written in the same silver-gray ink. Lucian set down a second sheet. It showed the original deployment order from the coup. including the exact position where I had been assigned to stand when the first strike fell. These records came from separate offices, I said. They were compiled through the council archive. His finger stopped beneath an authorization cipher reserved for the 9 ruling seats. Wax rasped under his glove. Someone with access to all 9 offices has been narrowing your movements for 6 months. I compared the coded times. They formed no random collection. Every listed location offered high walls, restricted exits, or blind corners where my strength would count for less than advanced knowledge. The attack had not ended with the coup. It had merely failed its first attempt. Why bring this after surrendering your weapon? Because obedience would put me beyond the citadel gates while the person hunting you remained inside them. Lucian's jaw tightened once. Dismissal cost me a uniform. Silence cost you your life. I crossed to the blue-lit war table and fed the first page to the brazier. Orange flame curled through the copied schedule, releasing the bitter odor of treated parchment. Then I pulled the bell cord. 2 guards entered, boots striking stone in perfect unison. Lucian did not move as they leveled their spears. Vale disobeyed a sovereign command and concealed evidence concerning the coup, I announced. Confine him beneath the western tower. No visitors. No questioning without my seal. 1 guard reached for Lucian's wrists. I caught the man's gaze and tapped twice against the table, the field signal for controlled deception. Recognition flickered across his face before discipline buried it. Lucian allowed cold iron to close around his hands. Only when the guards turned him toward the corridor did he look back at me. You believe the traitor will come for the evidence? No. I slid the empty folio into the locked drawer beneath my maps. They will come for you, because they must learn how much you told me. For the first time, Lucian was no longer positioned between me and the threat. I had placed myself at the center of its path and made his imprisonment the bait. The corridor swallowed them in torch smoke and receding chain links. I waited until the western tower bell sounded once, then issued a false notice declaring that Lucian would be transferred beyond the city walls at dawn. 9 sealed copies went to 9 council chambers. Before midnight, 1 seal was broken, and the footsteps descending toward Lucian's cell belonged to someone who had no legal reason to know where he was. A bitter scent rolled through the lower corridor before the intruder reached Lucian's cell, sharp as scorched cloves beneath the colder smell of iron. Torch flames guttered blue along the damp stone, and Adrian's pulse struck once, violently, against his throat. This was not poison meant to kill. It was an illicit heat catalyst, dispersed through the ventilation shafts to compromise the sovereign while every guard believed him safely above. Adrian pulled the alarm lever. Bronze shutters slammed over the vents with a deafening crash, sealing the contaminant inside the prison level and sealing him with it. Beyond the bars, Lucian caught the approaching intruder by the wrist, drove him against the wall, and tore away a council servant's gray mask. The man bit down on something hidden between his teeth. His body went slack before he could be questioned. The trap worked, Lucian said, breathing hard. Open the cell and leave. Adrian reached for the key, but heat surged beneath his skin so abruptly that the metal slipped from his fingers. His scent flooded the passage, cedar turning dark and sweet. Every Alpha station nearby recoiled as Adrian's dominance struck them, forcing knees against stone. Lucian alone remained standing. The iron bars trembled beneath his hands. A strange silver brightness moved through his eyes, there and gone, while his scent cut through the catalyst like cold rain over smoke. Send them away, Adrian ordered. Lucian did not hesitate. Clear the level. Lock the eastern gate behind you. The guards obeyed him because Adrian could no longer shape the words without revealing how badly his body was shaking. Their boots faded upstairs. The key lay between the sovereign and the prisoner, glinting in blue firelight. This reaction was engineered, Lucian said. Your instincts are treating every Alpha nearby as a threat. Not every Alpha. Adrian lowered himself to one knee, refusing to fall. Lucian's grip tightened around the bars. That is why I must stay inside. Another wave swept through Adrian. The stone floor felt cold beneath his palm, yet sweat gathered at the back of his neck. For years, a glance from him had silenced war rooms. Now his body answered the imprisoned man before him with a recognition older than command. Adrian picked up the key. Lucian stepped back. If you open this door, you decide what happens next. Not the catalyst. Not me. The lock turned with a heavy click. Adrian entered, then placed the key in Lucian's hand. Tonight, I relinquish command to you. Lucian's jaw flexed. You have never yielded control. Then understand what it costs me to choose it. Adrian removed the false shackles from Lucian's wrists and closed the cell door behind them. Nothing that followed belonged to force or accident. Lucian asked at every boundary, and Adrian answered clearly each time. Beneath muted bells and cooling torch smoke, command became trust, and the strongest alpha allowed another man to guide him through the night. Near dawn, the fever finally broke. Adrian slept beneath Lucian's cloak, one hand curled against the bodyguard's chest. Lucian remained awake, staring at a faint silver pattern spreading across Adrian's lower abdomen before it vanished beneath the skin. He covered it with his palm, but his expression hardened. His Enigma blood had recognized Adrian, and recognition had already begun changing him. Morning light struck the council table in 9 hard rectangles, turning every polished seal into a shard of white fire. Beneath the measured scrape of chairs, Adrian's pulse hammered out of rhythm. He remained standing while the counselors argued over reconstruction funds, one hand resting against the cold edge of the table. Then the silver tracery beneath his skin flared. The chamber tilted. His fingers crushed a crystal water glass before his knees struck marble. Lucian moved from the rear wall, but stopped when Adrian raised a bloodless hand. Remain where you are. The command cut through the chamber. Adrian rose without assistance, hid his trembling palm inside his coat, and ended the session with enough force to send every counselor into the corridor. Only after the bronze doors closed did he allow the royal physician to approach. The examination room smelled of alcohol, beeswax, and rain drifting through an open window. A silver instrument hummed over Adrian's abdomen, its light spreading beneath his skin like moonlight under ice. 2 distinct heartbeats answered, small, rapid, undeniable. Twins, the physician whispered. Approximately 3 weeks into accelerated gestation. Enigma linked. Adrian stared at the twin pulses on the glass screen. His body had survived poison blades, broken bones, and 3 challenges for the throne. Now his own center of balance had shifted, and the smallest lives in the kingdom controlled every breath he took. No record leaves this room. He removed the physician's signet, sealed the medical report himself, and locked it inside the sovereign vault. By noon, he had canceled public combat demonstrations, replaced fitted armor with ceremonial coats, and ordered meals delivered through an unmarked service passage. Each adjustment preserved his authority, but each also narrowed his life. Lucian found him fastening a reinforced sash beneath his uniform, the fabric rough against the silver pattern reappearing across his abdomen. You collapsed. I recovered. Lucian's gaze lowered. The silver in his eyes surfaced before he could conceal it. There are 2. Adrian went still. You can sense them? Since dawn. Lucian took 1 step closer, then stopped beyond arm's reach. My blood changed you. I should have warned you it was possible. You warned me you were dangerous. I made my choice. Adrian tightened the sash until his breath caught. The council can remove a sovereign declared physically compromised. If they learn this before I control the succession laws, they will take the throne and decide what happens to the children. Lucian's hand closed at his side. Then let me stand beside you. No. Adrian removed Lucian's royal insignia and placed it on the desk between them. From this hour, you will not enter my chambers, escort me in public, or approach within 10 feet unless summoned. No one can be allowed to connect your blood to my condition. Cold rain clicked against the window panes. Lucian looked from the insignia to Adrian's rigid posture, then heard the brief hitch Adrian could not suppress when another wave of weakness passed through him. Obedience would protect Adrian's secret. Distance could leave Adrian and the twins unguarded. Lucian bowed, but he did not take the insignia. I will obey your distance in public. His voice dropped beneath the rain. But I will not abandon my family. Adrian's eyes sharpened. They are not acknowledged as yours. That changes nothing. Lucian backed to the required 10 feet and stopped exactly at the threshold. Give me an order I can survive obeying, Adrian. Because if protecting your throne requires me to leave the 3 of you defenseless, this will be the first command I refuse in full. The bells began before noon, 9 iron notes rolling through the palace while rainwater streamed down the black windows. Outside Adrian's chambers, boots struck marble in hurried rhythms, and the air smelled of wet wool and lamp smoke. A herald waited beyond the sealed doors with a broadsheet trembling between his gloved hands. Adrian took it without inviting him inside. The accusation was printed in letters large enough to read across a crowded square. The Sovereign is gravely ill. Below it, anonymous council sources described his collapse and demanded an immediate examination. The West Gate is packed, the herald said. The council has summoned physicians and witnesses to the throne hall. 10 feet behind Adrian, Lucian stood stripped of royal insignia, silent against the cold stone. Prepare the underground carriage, Lucian said. There is a road beneath the East Chapel. Adrian folded the broadsheet once. Then again. No, by sunset, they will have legal grounds to confine you. Then they will receive their examination. He crossed to the wardrobe and removed his formal black coat. Its reinforced waist had once fit like armor. Now the pressure made his fingers tighten around the silver clasps. Rather than hide the change beneath ceremonial layers, Adrian chose a plain crimson mantle that left the altered line of his body visible. Lucian took one step forward, then stopped at the distance Adrian had ordered. If you enter that hall, they will count weakness in every breath. Adrian fastened the mantle at his throat. Let them count. The throne hall burned with white firelight when its doors opened. Hundreds of faces turned through the dry rustle of silk, parchment, and raised sleeves. Council physicians waited beside the dais, their steel instruments shining on blue cloth. Adrian did not ascend the steps. He stopped on the floor among them, where no throne could hold him above judgment. You asked whether I am dying, he said. His voice carried beneath the vaulted ceiling. I am not. A counselor lifted the broadsheet. Then submit to examination. Adrian removed his mantle and placed it over the physician's instruments. The fabric landed with a soft metallic clatter. There is no need. One hand settled over the firm curve below his ribs. The room went so quiet that rain could be heard ticking against the high glass. I am carrying twins. The declaration struck harder than a shouted command. Several counselors rose. One knocked over a chair, its legs scraping sharply across the floor. Adrian remained where every witness could see him, surrendering secrecy but not authority. The law calls pregnancy an impairment, a counselor said. The law was written by men who confuse vulnerability with surrender. Name the father. At the rear of the hall, Lucian's jaw tightened. Adrian met his eyes only once, forbidding movement without speaking. Then he faced the council. No, the unborn heirs belong under council protection. They belong to no institution. Adrian climbed the first step of the dais, each measured breath visible in the rise of crimson cloth. You wanted my condition exposed so I would flee, abdicate, or place my children in your custody. I will do none of those things. I remain sovereign, and anyone who reaches for them must do so in front of the entire realm. The gallery erupted. Some voices demanded removal. Others answered with Adrian's name. Lucian stayed back, forced to watch as Adrian turned his own body into the line no enemy could cross unseen. A clerk pushed through the disorder carrying a sealed decree. By emergency statute, he announced, the council demands the father present himself before tomorrow's final bell. If he does not, the twins will be declared unprotected claimants and placed under council guardianship at birth. Adrian's grip closed around the edge of the throne. Across the hall, Lucian reached beneath his coat and touched the bare place where his royal insignia had been. The council had failed to drive Adrian into hiding. Now it had given Lucian one day to remain hidden, or claim his family before the world. Gold light crawled across the throne hall floor as the final bell's ropes swayed above the western gallery, its shadow cutting over marble like a descending blade. Council clerks waited beneath it with fresh ink, while armored bailiffs sealed every door. Adrian sat rigid on the throne, one hand resting near the concealed curve beneath his coat. 10 feet behind him, Lucian Vale removed his gloves. Record my name, he said. His voice crossed the chamber before the bell could move. Heads turned. Boots struck stone as Lucian walked through the prescribed distance, past the nobles gathered below the dais, and stopped where every witness could see him. Adrian rose. You will say nothing. Lucian met his gaze. You protected me with your silence yesterday. I will not purchase another day with yours. The air carried hot wax, cold iron, and the sharp scent of rain entering through the high windows. Lucian drew a narrow black case from inside his coat and placed it on the council table. 9 locks clicked open beneath his fingers. Inside lay bloodline certificates, sealed medical records, and vellum marked with the silver crest of a lineage outlawed generations ago. "I am Lucian Vale," he declared. "I am the father of Sovereign Adrian's unborn twins. My blood awakened the gestation, and my blood is Enigma." The gallery fell so quiet that the scratch of a clerk's pen sounded like tearing cloth. A counselor seized the nearest certificate and held it toward the window. Silver threads appeared inside the parchment under the pale daylight, matching the brief pattern the royal physicians had witnessed across Adrian's abdomen. The royal physician stepped forward, robes whispering over the floor. After examining the seals, he pressed 2 fingers to the document and said, "The lineage is authentic. The children's paternity is legally established." The council could no longer classify the twins as unprotected claimants. They could not take them at birth. A breath left Adrian slowly, but Lucian was already unclasping the iron chain beneath his collar. From it hung a white medallion bearing the crown's shield, the immunity granted to royal guards for acts committed in sovereign defense. He set it beside the records. Under the Prohibited Bloodlines Act, concealed Enigma descent carries a sentence of death unless protected by royal immunity, the chief counselor said, his eyes narrowing. "You understand what surrendering this means?" "Yes." Adrian descended the dais, each step sharp against the marble. "Pick it up, Lucian." For the first time, Lucian's hand trembled. He closed his fingers instead around the edge of the table. "If I retain immunity, the council can argue that my claim was coerced under your authority. If I surrender it, my confession becomes independent testimony. You and the children receive full protection under succession law. I did not give you permission to die for us." "No," Lucian said quietly. "You gave me distance. I used it to choose." Adrian reached him as the bailiffs approached. Lucian did not resist when they removed his sword and fastened cold iron around his wrists. Instead, he turned his palms upward, offering the chains before anyone could force them on him. The gesture changed the room. The hidden father was hidden no longer. The twins were beyond the council's legal reach, and the man who had guarded Adrian for years now stood without rank, immunity, or escape. Adrian caught the front of Lucian's coat before the bailiffs could pull him away. Their faces stopped inches apart. "You claimed your family," Adrian said through clenched teeth. "Now let me claim the right to protect it." A council clerk stamped the confession in red wax. "Lucian Vale is remanded for sentencing at sunrise." The bailiffs led him toward the sealed doors, chains rasping softly between measured footsteps. On the table, beneath the surrendered medallion, one silver-threaded document remained turned face down. Adrian held Lucian's gaze until the doors closed between them. Then the unborn twins moved together for the first time, and the black case's final hidden seal broke open. A brittle snap cut through the throne hall, sharper than the chains fading beyond the sealed doors. The black evidence case opened by itself, releasing the dry scent of cedar and old sealing wax. Adrian turned over the silver-threaded document. It was not another lineage record. A royal cipher shimmered beneath the morning light, and beside it lay the private seal of his mother, dead for 16 years. "Clear the hall," Adrian ordered. The counselors protested, their robes whispering over cold marble, but the royal guards still answered to their sovereign. Adrian remained standing until the doors shut, then braced one hand against the table as the twins shifted beneath his ribs. The royal physician brought the page beneath a blue authentication flame. Silver letters rose through the parchment, followed by his mother's recorded voice, thin with age but unmistakable. "Lucian Vale was never appointed by the council. I placed him beside my heir." Adrian's fingers tightened around the table's carved edge. The physician examined the seal twice before bowing. "It is authentic." The message continued. His mother had discovered that a council faction wanted an heir they could shape into a weapon, undefeated, isolated, and taught to treat attachment as weakness. Lucian had been entrusted to guard not merely Adrian's life, but his ability to remain human when the throne demanded otherwise. Every brutal trial promoted as proof of Adrian's supremacy had been arranged by that faction. Every victory had strengthened the legend of the strongest alpha while stripping away another ally, another private choice, another reason to question the council's commands. The title Adrian had defended with blood and discipline had never been a crown. It was a leash polished until it resembled one. Another sheet slid from the case. It bore the names of the counselors who had funded the recent coup, the false illness report, and the illicit catalyst used near Lucian's cell. At the bottom waited an order authorizing Lucian's execution before sunrise testimony could be entered into the permanent royal record. Adrian seized the brass speaking horn connected to the palace guard stations. Its surface was cold against his palm. "Suspend the sentencing escort," he commanded. Static hissed through the horn before the captain answered. "The council has already transferred Vale to its private tribunal, Your Majesty. They claim sovereign interference is prohibited after immunity is surrendered." Adrian looked toward the high windows. Dawn had begun whitening the city roofs, and the first execution bell would ring within the hour. "Then seal every palace gate." "Under whose authority?" the captain asked quietly. Beyond the chamber, armored boots approached in disciplined formation. The council had come to reclaim its weapon. Adrian removed the sovereign's signet ring and pressed it into the physician's hand with the authenticated message. "Make copies. Send them to every guard post, court, and newspaper in the capital. If they erase my authority, they will do it in front of the entire kingdom." The twins moved again, one beneath each of his palms, as though answering. When the doors opened, Adrian faced the assembled counselors without his ring. Their leader lifted a warrant declaring him medically unfit and demanded his submission. Adrian laid his mother's command and the conspirators' names upon the table between them. "You did not create the strongest alpha," he said, his voice carrying through the stone chamber. "You created the man who now knows exactly what you fear." The distant bell mechanism groaned into motion. Adrian stepped down from the throne dais and toward the guards blocking his path. "Stand aside. I am going to Lucian." The council leader raised the warrant. "Take one more step, and the throne is forfeit." Adrian did not slow. "Then decide whether you want my obedience more than you want your system to survive." The bell struck once, and its iron note rolled through the chamber as guards lowered their spears across Adrian's path. Winter light spilled through the high windows, cold against the polished stone, while the warrant trembled in the council leader's hand. Adrian stopped only long enough to remove the crown from his head. "You made the throne conditional on my obedience," he said, setting it beside his mother's command. Gold rang against marble. "So keep it." Murmurs swept the hall. Before the council could seal his abdication in private, Adrian ordered the bronze doors opened and demanded a public tribunal. By noon, nobles, royal guards, physicians, and citizens packed the judgment court beneath smoking oil lamps. Lucian stood inside an iron enclosure at its center, wrists bound, his uniform stripped of every insignia. Adrian entered without crown or ring. The air smelled of wet wool and hot metal. "You surrendered the throne for me," Lucian said as Adrian approached. "No," Adrian placed Lucian's evidence case on the tribunal table. "I surrendered it so they could never use it to own us." The council leader demanded Lucian's immediate execution under the bloodline statutes. Adrian answered by calling the royal physician, who pressed the late queen's seal into warm authentication wax. Then Adrian distributed the coup orders, falsified medical decree, and execution command to the court clerks, who read each document aloud. Quills scratched furiously. Voices rose beyond the gallery rail. Still, the council leader invoked the founding blood code. Only approved alpha lines could rule, inherit, or claim children carrying forbidden blood. Adrian turned toward the crowded benches. One hand settled over the firm curve beneath his coat as the twins shifted. "That law calls my children property. It calls their father a crime. And it called me strong only while I remained useful." He lifted the original blood registry above a lamp. The parchment browned at its edge, releasing the bitter smell of scorched vellum. "I will not inherit power from a law that would kill my family." He let it burn inside the stone evidence basin. The royal guards hesitated. Then one lowered his spear. Others followed, iron tips striking the floor in a spreading rhythm. The tribunal erupted as citizens surged against the barriers, and the court clerks publicly entered Adrian's evidence into permanent record. With the council's authority collapsing under open testimony, Adrian crossed to Lucian's enclosure. The council leader seized the execution lever beside the gate, but the royal physician drove Adrian's signet into the mechanism, jamming it before the lock could seal. Adrian wrenched the gate open himself. Cold iron scraped his palms. Lucian caught his arm, but Adrian cut the restraints with a guard's surrendered blade. "You were ordered to protect my life," Adrian said, drawing Lucian out before the kingdom. "Today, I choose yours." The council leader shouted that an uncrowned, pregnant alpha had no authority to free a condemned Enigma. Adrian faced him with Lucian at his side rather than behind him. Across the court, guards removed their council badges, and the gallery thundered for the blood statutes to fall. The old order had lost its throne, its prison, and its silence in a single afternoon. Then the court senior clerk raised a blank charter above the uproar. "The blood system is void," she declared. "But the kingdom has no sovereign and no law of succession." Every face turned toward Adrian, toward Lucian, and toward the two unborn heirs moving beneath Adrian's hand. By sunset, they would have to decide whether freedom meant walking away or building something no crown had ever permitted. Sunset poured through the shattered tribunal windows, turning the blank charter in the senior court clerk's hands the color of fire. Outside, thousands filled the stone square. Their voices rolled beneath the open doors while cold wind carried the scent of rain and burned parchment through the chamber. "Choose a sovereign," the clerk demanded, "or every province will choose for itself." Adrian's fingers tightened over the twins, shifting beneath his ribs, but Lucian stepped forward first. The severed restraints still circled his wrists, their rough iron dark against his skin. "No," Lucian said, his voice reaching the gallery without a shout. "You have asked him to carry a kingdom since childhood. He will not carry it alone again." Instead of offering Adrian another throne, Lucian crossed to the blank charter and pressed his blood-stained royal guard badge onto the table. He proposed an elected assembly, laws applying equally to Alpha, Omega, Beta, and Enigma, and succession determined by public consent rather than birth. His children would inherit no subjects, only the same rights as every child beneath the charter. The council leader struck the table. "An outlaw does not design nations." Lucian turned his scarred wrists upward. "Then let the nation decide whether chains make a man less truthful." The guards opened the tribunal doors. Rain-cooled air flooded the room, along with the roar of the square, and the clerk read each provision aloud. One by one, provincial delegates placed their seals beneath Lucian's proposal. The council leader's seal remained untouched. By dusk, his office no longer existed. Adrian approached the table through amber light, removed the sovereign's signet from his hand, and set it beside Lucian's discarded badge. "My sons will not be born above anyone," he said, "and they will never be born belonging to anyone." The royal physician used that same signet one final time, stamping the charter that abolished hereditary ownership and established a provisional assembly. The metal rang against the wood like a small, clean bell. Months later, winter snow softened the capital's black rooftops while two newborn cries filled a modest house overlooking the public gardens. Firelight flickered across linen sheets. Warm milk and cedar smoke sweetened the room. Adrian sat upright with one swaddled boy against his chest, no crown above him and no guards at his door. The second infant stirred in Lucian's arms, tiny fingers closing around the faded mark left by his restraint. "You once disobeyed me to save my life," Adrian murmured. Lucian lowered himself beside him. "I would do it again." Adrian guided Lucian's hand over both children, then covered it with his own. "Not as my bodyguard." Lucian's breath caught softly in the hush between the baby's breathing. "Then as what?" Adrian drew him closer until their foreheads touched, freely surrendering the distance he had once used as armor. "As the man I choose beside me. As their father. As my equal." Spring found them before the new assembly, not upon a dais, but on the same stone floor as everyone else. Adrian declined every attempt to restore his title. Lucian accepted responsibility for organizing a civilian protection service whose first oath was to the law, never to blood. Their sons slept nearby beneath a window washed in gold, heirs to no throne and prisoners of no lineage. Adrian had once measured strength by how completely the world yielded to him. Holding Lucian's hand while their twins woke beneath a free sky, he finally understood that the greatest power he had ever possessed was the power to yield by choice and still be held.